Right, so Jeremy Hunt has just given his budget, and quite honestly, if you missed it, you really didn't miss much. Over an hour he spoke for, and for the most part, it was microeconomic tinkering and nothing that overtly affected ordinary working class people wanting to see if there were some pre-election sweeteners coming. Well, what he did put forward in the way of sweeteners was a bit of a damp squib, amounting to some £6 billion all told a year in benefits and bonuses to us, but other things he's tried to sell us, like non-dom status abolition, well, that was a bit of a con. Right, so a quick budget rundown reaction video, if you like, to what I've just witnessed and managed to stay awake through. There will be a lot of these videos around today, I'm sure, but of what was actually relevant to us in our ordinary everyday lives, there was little to cheer and a lot of putting the con into Conservatives. For an hour, Hunt spoke, and actually it amounted to very little. In fact, it probably took as long as it did, because Hunt filled his speech out with a swipe at Labour seemingly every 2 minutes, to the point I was shouting at the telly to just bloody get on with it, man. Opposition benches got away with a lot of heckling too. It was one of the more disruptive budgets I can remember watching. I think they were smelling blood on the opposition benches and they were really putting the boot in, and frankly, with Eleanor Lang in the Speaker's chair, they got away with it by and large. But it really was all really thin gruel. The big policy, if you can call it that, was the cut to national insurance that we already knew was coming. In fact, the Tories first posited this in January, and it elicited not so much as a ripple in their polling at the time, yet this still remained the big one in this budget, the saving the best for last moment, and we already knew about it. With so much talk of tax cuts from the Tories, this was basically it. 2% off employees' national insurance dropping from 10% to 8%, and for the self-employed it is dropping from 8% to 6% on earnings, obviously over that tax threshold of £12,570. Obviously it depends on how much you earn, because this is a percentage as to how much you save with this, and as always, it is a giveaway most of all to the biggest earners. An MP, for example, gains £750 a year thanks to this. A newly qualified nurse, however, far more useful, just £250. And if you're on such low wages that you don't pay tax or national insurance at all because you're below that threshold, this does absolutely nothing for you. The Tories deservedly got nowhere politically with this announcement before, and they won't now. Right, so now I'm left with what else to talk about, frankly. The inequality of high earners and child benefit. We'll come to this one. It wasn't really much of anything to talk about in and of itself. But Hunt has decided to deal with this issue, and if you're not aware of what it is, anyone earning over £50,000 isn't eligible for child benefit. But if a couple earning just under £50,000 each, and both work, so earning nigh on £100,000 between them, they still qualified for it. Oh, the poor dears, however will they get by on such money? Well, Hunt is going to make tax changes to address this situation, but that apparently is going to take until 2026 to do. So meanwhile, he raised the threshold of earnings up to £60,000 to qualify for it. Big bloody deal to all of us. So what else? What else indeed? £5 million to do up our village halls, no less. Well, I'm sure that'll help us keep the lights on and food in our bellies, won't it? £1 million on a memorial to Muslims who died in World War II in a, well, frankly, blatant show of trying to offset accusations of Islamophobia. That ought to be seen in the cynical manner it deserves. I am a cynic. That's exactly how I saw it. I doubt I'm going to be the only one. Though clearly such a memorial, was certainly way overdue, will be welcome. People on universal credit, so poor they have to take out loans to help with additional unexpected expenses. Oh dear, the fridge is gone. Will now have a whole 2 years instead of one to pay said loans back. Well, yay. The debt relief order charge of £90 is being abolished. Yay! And the household support fund will continue for another 6 months. Bribes, certainly, but really, really cheap, really small ones. And really not anything that's going to make life meaningfully better for people. He also froze alcohol and fuel duty. Hunt bleated on a lot about lower taxes equaling higher growth. They don't. It cannot. It is ridiculous to even try and justify that, but that is Thatcherism 101. Tax take is the offset to public spending. If you cut taxes, you have to cut public spending as well, or inflation goes up. Cutting taxes for those with the least is great. I'm all for it, but you need to levy more on the wealthy to make up for that. Yet if you listen to Hunt, they are apparently investing whilst making a very small tax cut to national insurance. Actually, he was cutting more, but calling it investment instead. He increased the VAT tax registration threshold a little bit. The Freeport's con of favourable rates in certain areas of the country was another investment. The oil and gas industry in the North Sea will continue to get stupidly favourable tax rates as well, but that's investment. He bragged of giving manufacturers of cars and computer equipment a nice going rate so they invested more here, but that's them investing, not the government, and they're only doing so because the government has incentivised them to do that with tax cuts. So what's the gain to the public purse here? Where's the growth come from that? Taxes in some cases have actually gone up so that Hunt can make his alleged cuts elsewhere, showing more of the con he was pulling. There's going to be a duty coming in on vaping. I don't argue against that particularly. Duty on tobacco is going up as well by 1%. Fair enough. I don't smoke. If you do, tough. The loopholes being exploited by the furnished holiday lettings industry, though, this was a more interesting one. Over holiday lettings tax are being closed. Multiple dwellings relief is being abolished. The energy profits levy is being extended for a bit longer when the industry just needs renationalising and taking back under our control. But the biggest con of all, the one he really tried it on with, and frankly I don't see how anybody hasn't seen through this, but the media are spinning like mad over it, as you can expect them to do. The biggest con was the expected abolition of the non-dom status, because no matter how many times you will hear that it is being abolished, it is not. It's just being replaced with another system. What Hunt wants to do is not just ditch it and leave it at that, leave people who exploit such a favourable tax regime because they can afford to use it. Instead, a 4-year limit will now be placed on basically non-dom status when people first come to this country, after which they must pay tax like everybody else is supposed to do. As for those already enjoying non-dom status, Hunt was a little bit more opaque, saying there would be a transitional period lasting 2 years, but what that transitional period would look like, we don't know. That's 2 years for them basically to find another way to avoid tax then. It's what they do. Non-dom status is just one way the rich have exploited our stupidly overcomplicated taxation system, and they will just find another. Apart from that, though, there were some promises on public services, a digital rollout in the NHS, for example, but it was shoulder-shrugging stuff. We need doctors and nurses, proper ones, real ones, not these fake doctor physicians associates people. Talking about tech in the health service isn't getting us seen, isn't getting us operated on, isn't getting us well and back to becoming productive members of society, if due to our health at this moment in time, we are not. There was also the predictable OBR contributions, which Hunt gurned through. Oh, look at this lovely tax cut-induced growth he smarmed. The fact we're currently in a recession seems to have gone clean over his head. What also went over his head is that the OBR predictions have been downgraded. They've downgraded growth since last time. There really isn't anything else to add. This is all there was. I heard on Sky, overheard, whilst writing this, I had the telly on next to me, that someone has said, I assume someone from the Tory party, said something along the lines of Hunt needed to use a defibrillator to get their electoral chances alive again, and instead he threw an aspirin at it. That pretty much sums it up very nicely, I thought. The Tories are doomed at the next election. They are frankly just delaying the inevitable now. They'd be better off getting on and calling the bloody thing, because politics right now feels like a plaster slapped on a particularly hairy arm being pulled off very slowly. It's just a case of, with Starmer waiting in the wings, he's stood there with a bigger plaster waiting to stick it on an even hairier part of your anatomy. What we haven't heard more of this time is the more lethal cuts to disability benefits that Hunt was talking about just a few months ago. Has he hidden them somewhere, or are they still to come if the Tories insist on squatting in power for as long as possible? Find out all about that particular story here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.